said, when you love what you do, it just sticks. He says, I know a lot of languages by heart. Python, JavaScript, Swift, even though each has so many lines of code.
Welcome to Prism of Torah with Rabbi Aaron Prisman, engaging Divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
Shalom Uvracha. In this week's Parsha, I want to share with you a phenomenal idea that I heard by Rabbi Zev Lev to answer the following question. We know that in our Parshas Behaaloscha, we have a very unique situation. Based on the Gemara and Shabbos, according to one opinion, there's a pasuk that is totally misplaced and placed in our Parsha smack in between something. And that's why it's demarcated by two inverted nuns. Inside is the pasuk about the fact that the journey they took the Aron together to war. And it says, Vayibin Sa'aron Vayomer Moshe Kuma Hashem, etc. The famous pasuk we say when we take the Sefer Torah out of the Aron HaKodesh. And why is it there? So the Gemara explains, because we want to break. We want to ensure we have a break between two negative things about Klal Yisrael, two sins they performed. According to the Ramban on this parsha, he explains the overall problem is that we do not want to have a chazaka, which we know all over Shas. A chazaka is an established patterns that usually gets formed after 3 consecutive occurrences. In our case, 3 occurrences of a sin, and we want to make sure we make a split to that, because that makes Klal Yisrael not look good at all. And hence the Torah deliberately interrupted these 3 sins to prevent a chazaka, a negative chazaka going against the behavior of Klal Yisrael. What are the 3 sins, according to the Ramban? Sin number 1, that after getting all the mitzvahs, they felt it was too much. They ran out of there like a child running out of school. Sin number 2, they complained, why do we have to hurry and go so quickly, so many days in a row, and already get to Eretz Yisrael? It's too hard for us. Easy does it. Let's go slowly. That's what sin number 2. Sin number 3 is that they complained, all we can eat is the man. We want meat. We want meat. So there are 3 sins there, and hence this demarcation of this pasuk, that it's not really its natural place, the Torah put it right in between these sins. The million-dollar question that can be asked is, so why is the demarcation placed between sin number 1 and sin number 2? It would have made a lot more sense to just demarcate it when you need it, which is before sin number 3, before we create this pattern. Do it between sin number 2 and number 3. And I want to share with you an answer by Rabbi Zev Lev that I heard, an unbelievable insight that I think is very relevant to many of us. And he says it could be indeed that usually it would make more sense to demarcate and make a split between sin number 2 and sin number 3. However, there's another parameter over here. There's something we didn't realize. Sin number 1 and sin number 2 are showing something that screams out also against Klal Yisrael. And hence, in this unique instance, it makes a lot more sense to split between sin number 1 and sin number 2. Sin number 1 is talking about Klal Yisrael, that they're showing us they are full of energy. They ran out of Har Sinai after getting all the mitzvahs like a child. So they do have the potential of running and fully energetic. However, when it came to sin number 2, they showed us the opposite. We're not energetic. We can't go from place to place so many days in a row to 3 days in a row already walking to get there. It's Israel. Slow down. What are we running for? So are they energetic or not? Unfortunately, in these instances, they showed that anything that was fitting for their best interest, not for the Torah and the mitzvahs, they did. So when it was in their interest to run away from the mitzvahs, they were energetic to run away from Har Sinai. However, when it was a spiritual interest for them to go fast, go towards Eretz Yisrael, live with the Torah and Eretz Yisrael, which is our destination, suddenly they said, why go so fast? And that is something that also portrays Klal Yisrael in a very negative way. This is very similar to our very famous Midrash Rabbah. The Midrash Rabbah on Yosef, when he revealed himself to the brothers, he says, I am Yosef. Is my father still alive? There's many questions on that episode. Because at the end of the day, Yosef already by then knew his father was alive. The brothers told him that. So what was he asking them? And why were the brothers so scared when they suddenly realized it was him? The Midrash says from here we know, we should be very bothered and troubled by the eventually Yom Adin, the judgment day. And he explains, the Beis HaLevi explains this Midrash as follows. And he says, Yosef was telling them, wait a second. The whole time you're telling me, come on, we have a father, feel bad for our father. He already lost one kid because he thought he lost Yosef. And now he's going to lose another kid? You're not. You took as captive, you took Binyamin, his youngest child. Please have mercy on our father. So Yosef says, wait a second. Is my father still alive? He's hinting to them. Until now you told me you really cared about your father. If you really cared about your father, I am Yosef. Is my father still alive? Hello, what happened back in the day? What happened back in the day when you pretended, after you sold me, you pretended I was killed? Were you not worried about my father's feelings then? So you do whatever's good for you. When you want to sing the melody, I'm very worried about our father, then you did so. And back then, you didn't do so. There's inconsistency in this behavior. And that is what's going to be so dangerous for us in Yom Adin, unless we clean up our act and ensure we act in a very consistent way. Kol od we're consistent, it's better than not being consistent and always doing what's better for us. The Midrash, Tana Devei Eliyahu, talks about a scenario where Eliyahu Hanavi sees this fisherman and he tells him, aren't you worried? You're wasting all your time. You're not learning Torah at all. What are you doing with your life? And the fisherman says, I'm not worried at all. My intelligence I barely have any intelligence. I'm not able to learn Torah. Then Eliyahu Hanavi asks him, so how do you make your living? Explain to me what you do. And the man described how he creates these sophisticated fishing nets in such a way. And Eliyahu says, wait a second. For fishing nets and your profession, you have wisdom, but for Torah, you claim you don't? The man recognized what happened and he started crying because of his self-deception. Same is true by all of us. A person buys a new car. Believe you me, he knows how to do bdikas chametz, unbelievable. He can look for every scratch in the car before he pays the money. However, do we do the same type of bdikas chametz when we get our homes prepared for Pesach? And so, there are many examples of this. The concept is very understood. We have to make sure that we're at least consistent in our behavior. It's even better if, no matter what, we're always makbid on Torah and mitzvahs, on the spiritual aspects of our life, which is what life is all about. But at least we should be consistent and not do the following, that when it comes to our personal pursuits, then suddenly we have these characteristics that we claim we do not have when it comes to spirituality. I want to end up with a story that I think brings alive this point. And this is based on a true story of a friend of mine that's a Rav in Silicon Valley. David was a successful developer in the Silicon Valley. He attended a community shiur where the rabbi announced a new initiative, learning Mishnayos by heart. Just one Mishnah per week. When the Rav, my friend, came to David and asked him, how about you join us as well? So he shook his head and he said, Rabbi, I wish I could, but I have a terrible memory. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast. Hebrew is especially hard for me. It just doesn't stick. The rabbi said, okay, I understand. However, it's very interesting. 2 weeks later, the rabbi's, my friend, his teenage son really needed help with some coding project that he was learning. Someone suggested, ask David, and he's in your congregation. He really can help. And indeed, he graciously agreed to help. As the rabbi watched David work together with his son, helping him out, he was amazed. Suddenly, he saw how he figured out this complex code, syntax, and all from his memory. He remembered all the syntax, the language, sections of documentation. He could even say them word by word, verbatim. When my friend came to ask David, how do you remember all this? So he kind of laughed it off. He said, when you love what you do, it just sticks. He says, I know a lot of languages by heart, Python, JavaScript, Swift, even though each has so many lines of code. My friend told me that at that point, David himself realized what has happened. And he told him straight out, my friend, he said, David, you just showed yourself how you could memorize everything. So one Mishnah a week you weren't able to do? There was a bit of a smirk and a silence that followed that spoke volumes. And this is exactly the point that Rav Zev Lev is teaching us, how nicely he brings that out from our Parsha, that we have to ensure that we are at least consistent in our behavior, at least towards spirituality like we are for our own selfish desires. Have a good Shabbos.
This concludes another episode of The Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Ellie Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on the Prism of Torah.